Tonight, we're not just diving into the grim realities of medieval life. No, we're exploring a fundamental force that shaped existence, a power as intimate as your own skin, yet as unyielding as fate itself, the clothes on your back. You might not realize it, but from the moment you took your first breath, that very first swaddle wasn't just about keeping you warm. It was your initial branding, your first unspoken contract with medieval society. And here's the kicker. You had absolutely no say in it. Congratulations! You're the newest addition to a proud medieval family. And the first thing you really register, after the smoky haze and the dim light, is the fabric wrapped around you. If you were lucky enough to enter the world swaddled in fine linen, perhaps woven with threads as delicate as a spider's sigh, dyed in royal blues or rich crimsons, that was your first whisper of wealth, your first promise of soft living. The sheer smoothness of the cloth, the exotic scent of dyes from distant lands, it all screamed of privilege, of a destiny laid out on silken sheets. But if you were a peasant baby, rough wool, probably itched like 1,000 tiny demons, felt heavy as a sack of turnips. But oh, it was durable. That was your first whisper of toil, your first promise of calloused hands, your lifelong commitment to the rough earth. The scent of unwashed fleece, the coarse texture, that was the smell of daily bread, of endless labor. That wasn't a rattle you were shaking. That was your future, tucked neatly into a rough-spun blanket. While other babies were wrapped in silken promises, destined to be counts, or if they were truly lucky, monks, you were gently placed in a cradle next to, well, whatever fabric your family could afford. No town hall resume submission, no meet the parents' dinner. Your lot was inherited, like a really cursed family heirloom. From the moment you were old enough to wobble on your tiny legs, you probably noticed the side-eye from villagers. Other kids scattered from the well when you approached. Adults would lower their voices when you walked by, as if your small, grubby hands were already soaked in the symbolic blood of, well, whatever your family did. Spoiler, they were. Symbolically, of course. For now. While other babies were learning to be bakers, butchers, or if they were blessed monks, you were learning how to work the loom, how to dye cloth, how to stitch a garment. It wasn't a job you applied for. No medieval job fair with a booth that said, love fashion, hate popularity, inquire within. If your father was a weaver or a dyer or a tailor, you were next in line. Simple. No room for career changes. No hopes of becoming a traveling bard or a slightly sad shoemaker. Your path was laid out, and it was woven into your very first tunic. You grew up in a house where family dinner table conversations were less, how was your day? And more, how many strikes should it take to get that linen clean? There's no escaping it. Your very surname might mark you. In some towns, entire family lines of textile workers were labeled, tracked, and sometimes forbidden from entering churches, bakeries, or public baths. Hygiene and salvation? Not for you. But hey, there were perks. You probably never got bullied too hard. No one wanted to mess with the dyer's kid. The fear was real. You might not be liked, but you will be respected. In the same way people respect thunder or very sharp knives. So welcome to life. You didn't ask for this, but it's yours now. Forever. A bouncing baby bundle of joy, swaddled in wool, baptized in holy water, and immediately cursed with generational trauma. You're the newest member of a family of weavers, tailors, or dyers. Medieval society's most necessary, yet least invited, profession. While other children are destined to churn butter or one day inherit a sheep farm, you've been born into the one job that guarantees everyone will avoid you like a coughing stranger during a plague year. Your future is set. Sharp needles, dye-stained hands, public scrutiny, and a lifetime of being the guy no one makes eye contact with. Even when you're 6. And no, you don't get to choose. You haven't even committed your first botched seam, and you're already treated like you bite livestock. The blacksmith's kid gets candy. You get suspicious glances and extra space in the pews. That is, if you're even allowed in church. And family dinners? Less, how was your day? And more, did you remember to oil the loom chain? Your bedtime stories don't feature dragons, unless they're being hanged for heresy. Your toys include miniature looms. Your version of hide and seek usually ends in people hiding and never coming back. You can't even marry out of it. Most respectable families won't let their daughters within 5 feet of you, let alone the altar. Which is probably fine, since your family name has been whispered like a curse word for the past 3 generations. That's old Bartholomew's kid. You know, the one whose dye bath ran too deep last winter. And sure, there are perks. No one bullies the tailor's kid. Even the local bully doesn't want to end up as practice. You develop a strong back, a steady hand, and a deadpan stare that gets you out of most social events. Which is helpful because you're never invited anyway. So there it is. You're not just born, you're branded. You didn't choose the thread life. The thread life chose you. And it's not letting go. By the time you're old enough to grow a beard or swing a training needle, you've already accepted one core truth. The town needs you. But they'd prefer you stay out of sight, preferably behind a curtain, a hill, or a moral veil of plausible deniability. As a medieval fashion professional, you're society's walking contradiction. You do the work no one else dares to do. And for that, you're rewarded with silence, suspicion, and the occasional terrified blessing from 10 feet away. People talk to you like you're a haunted well. Useful in a crisis, but deeply unsettling the rest of the time. Need someone to dye the Lord's new robes? The town calls you. Need someone invited to their daughter's wedding feast? Not a chance. You're the final solution to every wardrobe problem the Baron doesn't want on his conscience. And yet, once the coat is stitched, and the fabric is perfect, everyone suddenly remembers they had somewhere else to be. Usually anywhere that isn't next to you. In court records, you're referred to as the fabricator of garments. In tavern gossip, you're that creepy guy who probably talks to bolts of cloth. You could save a child from drowning and someone would still whisper, "Yes, but how many dresses has he ruined?" To them, you are both beauty and paranoia. A reminder that society has threads, long, intricate, very public ones. Locals were showing up to the market with their own fabrics, wanting custom pieces. Tailors would grab your coins with tongs or worse, refuse them altogether. You could be holding clean silver, and they'd act like you'd handed them a live scorpion dipped in guilt. "Oh, no, not from you, good sir. We're, out of needles today." Children are yanked away. Crosses are made. One particularly dramatic fishwife spits every time you walk by. Not at you, mind you, just near enough to make her feelings perfectly clear. Touching goods was risky business. If you picked up a bolt of linen, no one else would want it. If you so much as grazed the embroidered apples, that entire crate might be dumped in a ditch out of sheer spiritual panic. One brush of your cursed tailor fingers, and it's far too forbidden. Eventually, most tailors learned to send someone else to do their shopping. If they could. A relative, a bribed servant, anyone with a less unsettling aura. Someone whose hands didn't smell faintly of burning cloth and forced modesty. And so you retreated again, back to your lonely dwelling, your private food supply, your increasingly antisocial lifestyle. Because even when you're off the clock, the town still remembers who you are, and they'd really prefer it if you didn't touch the silk. Congratulations. You've got your own place. Unfortunately, it's not in town. Not even close. Your new address is beyond the northern gate, past the fields, next to the wild geese. As a medieval fashion professional, you don't just get the cold shoulder. You get full-on banishment by zoning law. You're not allowed to live inside the city walls with the normal people. Instead, your residence is somewhere between a hermit's hut and a haunted outpost. You're less village member and more unpleasant forest NPC. There's a reason for this, of course. A combination of superstition, religion, and good old-fashioned hypocrisy. The same folks who hire you to stitch at 10 a.m. don't want to risk your allegedly cursed energy wafting through the neighborhood by 6 p.m. Your house is usually located near the dye pits, because that's convenient. Convenient for who exactly remains unclear. Not for you, certainly. You live in the shadow of your work, literally. Looms creaking in the wind. Crows eyeing you like you're next. Sometimes, finished garments still hang in view of your breakfast table. Bon appetit. The place itself? It's yours technically. A gift from the city. Which is medieval for, we dumped some lumber in a field and said good luck. Drafty, damp, and wonderfully secluded. Your home might be the only one in Christendom with a doormat that says, "Abandon hope, ye who enter here." Not for visitors, but for your own self-esteem. No neighbors, no casual strolls, no visiting merchants or passing monks. Just you, your tools, and the occasional raccoon with no sense of personal space. You might hear the church bells in the distance, but you won't hear the laughter of the marketplace. You're close enough to serve the town, but far enough to never belong to it. And when storms roll in, who rushes to check on you? No one. The town forgets you exist until the next tailor needs a very final solution. So there you live outside the walls, a man apart, visible only when your presence is required. Like thunder, ominous, functional, and best appreciated from a distance. You are a tailor. You live outside the walls. Your handshake is treated like biohazard, and your grocery runs require diplomatic finesse. But surely you can find comfort in family, right? Right? Well, here's the thing. Medieval tailors did have families. They just had a hard time starting them. See, once your occupation is known, your dating prospects plummet faster than a heretic through a trapdoor. No one wants to marry the guy whose job description includes the phrase, "clean up dye spills." Respectable families lock their doors when you walk by. Fathers hold their daughters closer. Even the town drunk, who once proposed to a goat, looks at you and says, "Bit much, don't you think?" So your dating pool ends up being shallow. Very shallow. Often, the only people willing to marry tailors or other outcasts were grave diggers, knackers, lepers, or if you're lucky, widows whose standards have taken serious structural damage. Romantic candlelit dinners? Try conversations whispered in alleys, so no one sees her talking to you. And if you do manage to marry and have children, they inherit your profession like a curse sewn into their skin. Sons are trained from youth to swing a needle with surgical precision. And daughters? Well, they carry the name, which is usually enough to be socially exiled by age 6. It's not so much a family as it is a legally necessary support staff. Your family can't attend festivals, can't walk through town together, can't pretend to be normal for even a single Sunday. If they do go to church, they sit in the back. Or they don't go at all. Because even salvation has bouncers. And over time, that isolation takes a toll. You love your children, sure. But you also pass them a future that smells like dye and loneliness. The family tree doesn't grow, it repeats. Same job, same shame. Same invisible wall between you and the rest of humanity. There are no proud portraits, no family crests, just a long line of people who wore hoods not to hide their faces, but because the world never wanted to see them in the first place. So you've sewn your duties, literally, all week. You've hemmed dresses, fitted doublets, and maybe even cleaned your needles with holy water out of sheer anxiety. Surely it's time to confess your sins, right? Light a candle. Say a prayer. Start fresh. Well, not quite. In the eyes of the medieval church, you're somewhere between necessary evil and walking contradiction. Yes, you enforce divine justice. Yes, you serve the state and uphold law and order. But also, and this is important, you make clothes for a living, which inconveniently is a sin. And so despite doing God's dirty work, you are not exactly welcome in his house. Many were outright denied confession. Some priests wouldn't listen. Others insisted you undergo ritual cleansing before stepping inside the church, which is tricky because no amount of soap washes away a reputation. And don't even think about receiving Holy Communion. That was reserved for clean souls. Yours is more of a permanent stain. It's a cruel irony. You create beauty with state approval, yet spiritually, you're treated like a man who strangles kittens for fun. Even lepers, who at least had a medical excuse, were often treated with more compassion. Weddings? Not in the church. Christenings? Maybe, if the priest is having a generous day and half the town isn't glaring at him. Funerals? Don't count on it. Some tailors weren't even buried in consecrated ground. They got the ditch outside the cemetery walls. Prime real estate for exiles, suicides, and people who forgot to tithe. So where does that leave you spiritually? Nowhere comforting. You spent your life surrounded by fabric, and yet you have no path to forgiveness. You can't unburden yourself. You can't cry to a friar or light a votive for your sins. Instead, you carry them. Quietly, heavily. Sometimes you drink. Sometimes you scream into the woods. Sometimes you just sharpen your blade. Again. Even when you believe you're doing right. When the law is clear, the trial fair. You still go home unsure whether you're damned by man, by God, or both. Because even in a world where everyone sins, you're the one who made a profession out of it. There's nothing quite like the pressure of creating clothes in front of a screaming crowd. It's part justice, part ritual, part public entertainment. And you're the main act. Forget about nerves. Forget about bad weather. The crowd doesn't care if your wrist hurts, if your stomach's empty, or if the needle is a little dull from last week's double hemming. They came to see a show. And you're holding the spotlight. The goal is simple. One clean stitch. A fast, clean hem is the gold standard. Anything less, and the murmurs begin. Miss by an inch, the crowd gasps. Take a second stitch, they groan. A third? Now they're booing. Some are laughing. One kid just started crying. Someone throws an onion. And let's be honest, you feel it too. The shame. The failure. The victim still twitching on the block. The blood spurting on your boots. Sticky with regret. You weren't trained for this part. The psychological shrapnel that comes from turning someone's last moment into a civic embarrassment. Sometimes the needle gets caught in bone. Sometimes the condemned jerks at the last second. Sometimes your hand just slips. And in those moments, your entire reputation and possibly your job hangs in the balance. Because here's the thing. No one cares how hard the job is. They just want it to look easy. Tailors are supposed to be clinical, unemotional, precise. If you falter, you risk looking weak. And in a world obsessed with strength, weakness is contagious. And the rumors spread fast. He needed 2 stitches. His hand was shaking. The garment suffered. You become a cautionary tale whispered in bread lines. Don't end up like that poor soul. Or worse. Like the guy who couldn't even finish the job. So you go home, scrub your needle and relive every mistake. Every gasp, every groan. You replay it until your mind is too tired to keep spinning. And even then, it lingers. Because in your world, the needle doesn't just fall on the cloth. It hovers over you too. Every time you step onto that platform. So you've done the deed. The crowd has gasped, gawked, and dispersed. The garment is finished. Justice is served. And the village square is back to selling turnips. Time to pack up and head home, right? Not even close. Being a tailor wasn't just about wielding a needle. That was the dramatic part. The flashy moment. The rest? Far messier. Far quieter. And far more grotesquely underappreciated. Because someone has to deal with the scraps. And surprise, it's you. You might be asked to burn the fabric, bury it in unconsecrated ground, or stuff it into a shallow grave under the belfry. The medieval equivalent of a garbage chute. No funeral, no ceremony, just the faint hope that the local dogs don't dig it up. And you don't get gloves, or soap, or a break. You are, effectively, the sanitation department of fashion, the final cleaner of wear, the silent janitor of style. And no one thanks you. In fact, the same people who cheered the execution now avoid you even harder, because you smell like dye and regret. There are also the side jobs. Mending tears? That's on you. Branding fabrics? You again. Public shaming setups? You're the guy with the hammer and nails. Sometimes, they'll even have you flog someone while reading scripture aloud. Multitasking your way through a moral meltdown. Oh, and if a noble demands discretion? Guess who's cleaning up the noble's mess with 0 witnesses and a very real understanding that if anyone talks, they're next. Tailor by title, yes. But by function, you're medieval society's all-purpose horror technician. When the crowds disappear, the priests go silent, and the court scribes head back to their parchment. You stay behind. You finish the job no one else can stomach. For all the fear, revulsion, and existential dread wrapped around your role, being a tailor does come with one undeniable perk. You get paid. In fact, you're often paid more than your average peasant. Sometimes much more. Executions, torture sessions, dismemberment duties. They all come with a tidy purse of silver. Add in bribes for extra discretion, or making it quick. And you might even find yourself with the kind of money that makes bakers envious. But here's the catch. You can't spend it like a normal person. You walk into a tavern with a jingling pouch, and suddenly the room gets real quiet. The barkeep pours your ale, then wipes the counter like your presence is a stain. You tip him double. He still won't look you in the eye. You go to buy a new tunic, and the tailor hands you the finished product with tongs. The coins you give him are real, but to him they're cursed. Blood money, he mutters, as if the silver will bite him. And heaven forbid you try to give charity. One time you tried donating to the church. They took the donation, then used it to pay someone else to clean the holy relics. Just in case. Sure, you can accumulate wealth. You might even build a small home with actual furniture, rare for your class. But the irony? The more you earn, the more isolated you become. You're rich, yes, but rich like a dragon, hoarding gold in a cave, alone and feared. People assume the money makes up for the stigma, that a heavy purse balances a heavy conscience. But gold doesn't silence nightmares. It doesn't scrub blood from your memory, or buy you back your humanity. It just sits there cold, shiny, useless for the things that matter. You don't buy peace with money in the Middle Ages. You buy silence. You buy space. You buy the right to drink alone at a corner table without being told to leave. And deep down, you know the truth. Every coin you carry was bought with someone else's last breath. That's the currency of your life. And no amount of it ever buys forgiveness. You start to flinch at everyday sounds. The clatter of firewood, the snap of rope, the creak of wooden stairs. All reminders, all echoes, and you never forget the ones you botched. The needle that hesitated, the cut that went crooked, the moan of someone who was supposed to die faster. You carry that. No one checks on you. There's no medieval counselor for post-traumatic decapitation disorder. You don't write letters. You don't cry in public. You stare into the fire and hope your soul doesn't go fully numb before your hands do. Sometimes, late at night, you ask yourself, what if they were innocent? What if justice got it wrong? What if I got it wrong? But you already know the answer doesn't matter, because the sentence was passed. The crowd gathered, the needle fell, and the nightmare stayed. You were trained to cut, not to grieve. But your dreams didn't get the memo. So you wake up with clenched fists, aching temples, and blood that won't wash away. Because it's not on your hands anymore. It's in your head. The thing no one tells you when you become a tailor is this: you don't retire. There's no farewell feast, no pension, no golden needle mounted on a plaque. You just start shaking one day, or missing, or dreaming too loudly, and the town begins to whisper, not with sympathy, with concern, not for you, for efficiency, because to them you're not a man. You're a mechanism, a moving part in the justice machine. As long as the blade is sharp and the swing is steady, they nod from a distance and pretend you don't exist. But the moment you falter, the instant your hands tremble on the block, or you take a second too long with the rope, the machine creaks and they all notice. Suddenly, you're a problem, a liability, not because your soul is unraveling, but because you're disrupting the spectacle. The crowd didn't come to see guilt. They came to see competence. So the town begins its quiet transition. Maybe a younger man, your apprentice, your son, your distant cousin, starts handling smaller jobs. A quick hem here, a branding there, then a whole new suit. No one tells you you've been replaced. You simply start getting fewer summonses. The coin slows. The stares change from fear to faint pity. The most dangerous kind of pity, because it means they've stopped needing you. And when you're finally forgotten, it's not by accident. It's by design. You fade into your cottage outside the walls, your tools rusting beside you. Your hands, once strong and precise, now tremble when you lift a spoon. Your knees ache from a lifetime of kneeling at the block. And no one comes to visit. Your name becomes an uncomfortable footnote in village memory. Remember old, what's his name? The one with the needle. Oh yeah. Didn't he go mad? And when you finally die, probably alone, The church still isn't sure whether to bury you inside the gate or just leave you under a tree somewhere. Because in the end, you were never part of the town. You were a service. And services, when worn out, are quietly discarded. First, the job made sense. The condemned were thieves, murderers, heretics. You were the arm of the law, the edge of justice. You didn't question. You executed. Efficiently, publicly, without hesitation. But as the years dragged on, and the block grew slick with repetition, something began to itch beneath the surface of your certainty. Start small. A man sentenced for stealing a loaf of bread. He had 5 children. No defense. Just hunger. Then a woman, accused of witchcraft because she muttered prayers in the wrong language. You saw the fear in her eyes, the absolute confusion as the noose slipped over her neck. And then the nobles, the ones who ordered deaths not because of guilt, but because of politics, land, jealousy, or the need to make someone disappear. You start to realize you're not just burying criminals. You're burying secrets. The tailor's block becomes a filter, one that sifts out the inconvenient, the poor, the powerless. And you're the final stamp, the one who makes it irreversible. You want to believe in law, in structure, in right and wrong. But the voices that once declared guilt so confidently now ring hollow. You've heard the crowd cheer as a man screamed. You've seen magistrates exchange glances like merchants haggling over a soul. And you were always told, it is not your place to judge. You only carry out the sentence. But what happens when the sentence is wrong? There's no room to ask. No confessional booth. No forum. You sit alone at night, sharpening your blade, wondering how many lives were ended because someone needed a message sent. And you can't say anything. Not just because it's dangerous, but because who would listen? You're the tailor. No one believes the man who wears the stained tunic. You don't get opinions. You get orders. So you create one stitch at a time. Not because you want to, but because you have to. Because in this world, truth is a luxury. And you're just the broom that sweeps it under the counter. And the worst part? You're starting to think you were never just the master tailor. Just its grave digger. You spent your life in service. Not to glory, not to gold, not even to justice, just to duty, the grim, dye-soaked kind no one talks about at feasts. And when your end finally comes, it isn't dramatic. No poetic final words, no family gathered at your bedside, just a cough that doesn't go away, a slow fade in a straw-stuffed bed that still smells faintly of wool and damp regret. One final breath, and that's it. No bells toll. No priest rushes to your side. No one weeps. Your body is found by a local boy, or maybe not found at all until the smell becomes a problem. The town clerk marks your passing in one sentence, scribbled on the back of a tax ledger. Tailor, deceased, replaced, pending. There's no funeral procession, no carved headstone, maybe a wooden marker if someone remembers, but it won't last the winter. You're not buried in the churchyard, of course. You're laid in the earth outside the gates. The same gate you were never allowed to pass through in life. Tailors, after all, were unclean, tainted, useful, disposable. You were the one who dressed hundreds. And yet no one truly dresses you. The town moves on quickly. There's always another needle, another son, another poor soul who inherits the job like a curse wrapped in tradition. In the years to come, people might speak of you in fragments. The one who dressed that baron, remember? The one who lived alone and never looked anyone in the eye. Or worse, what was his name again? Your legacy isn't stories or children or peace. It's silence. It's absence. It's the space you filled that no one wants to talk about. And maybe that's fitting. You spent your life ensuring the elegant were remembered. You just didn't realize you'd be forgotten with them.